Reckless by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Published by Image. Amazing. I honestly, it kind of scares me a little bit of how much I love Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' work, because I could easily fill up my entire shelves and my entire world with the work of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and Reckless definitely follows suit. And I've been waiting ages to fully talk about this series, really, because I wanted at least 5 of these to come out, and I'm glad that at the moment they've taken a break from producing these to give me a chance to actually talk about them. And the cut-off point in volume 5 is a perfect time to kind of do a video on them and talk about the series in general, I think. The story itself follows Ethan Reckless, who is sort of a private investigator, but not. What happens is he's got a phone number. The people who have issues, who have problems, call. They leave a message on his answer phone, and then he decides what jobs he wants to do. And that's basically what happens. Is it opens up with people leaving him messages and then deciding what he wants to do. But the start of this is him having a message from an old flame, from someone in his past. And that story is a great kind of entranceway and window into the past of Ethan Reckless. He's a surfer, a really intelligent guy. You find out early on that he was part of the FBI, so he's got training on that front. And one of the major things from his past is that he was involved in an undercover operation, and there was an explosion which affected his mind and his brain, give him, I suppose you would say, brain damage, but it's not as kind of extreme as that. What it did is it really affected his personality and how he perceived the world. So he's quite, he's quite, how to put it, he's quite cold to the world. And now and again, he'll kind of, open up and be very kind of loving and very kind. But equally, the main emotion that he can channel to great effectiveness is anger. And so he goes to town on people when they're messing with some parts of his life. But equally, in this story, you get the backstory of him. So you go into the FBI background, you go into him being caught up in this explosion, him forming a relationship with this girl years ago, and then this girl coming back into his life. And she asks him to help her out, get some money that she's owed, and it goes off from there. In the storytelling of this, you get everything peppered in about his life, about Ethan. You understand that he's now living in a cinema, and the cinema was given to him in lieu of payment for a job he did for someone else in previous years. And so he keeps getting either paid in property or in materials or cash or stuff like that. But he does tons of things, everything. He's not just kind of there to find people or to be a tough man or to do any of these things. He's open to any jobs as long as they're interesting. But this first one is obviously a personal job that he wants to take on because he fell in love with this woman and wants to make sure that she's all right and cared for. The story twists and turns in so many ways, and not to spoil anything, because I think one of the major parts of all these Reckless stories are the mysteries behind them, are what's going to happen to the characters. Because again, a woman turns up, she gives him some piece of information, he goes, tracks it down, and then it's slightly different, it's slightly off, or something happens to her or him that turns the story totally on its head. And that happens frequently in all of the Reckless stories. There's always some point where it turns and goes off in a different direction. Could be halfway through, could be just before the end, but it is always a point where you were presented something that turns the story on its head in a really good way, to be fair. The artwork by Sean Phillips is phenomenal. His son, Jacob Phillips, does the colouring as well. And I think the colouring really suits this world of 1980s LA, because Jacob's colouring is really bright and vibrant in many different ways. Even when they're doing kind of killing scenes and shooting and fire scenes, it's always got that brightness to it. And I don't think it suited some of the other stories that they've worked on, but for the Reckless series, it fits like a glove for me, really. It really does work well. And Sean Phillips' art, he's got this really heavy outline to his characters in this story, which I love. It's like a thick, luxurious outline in black for most of the characters, and I love that massively. Ethan utilises his old connections with his FBI colleagues back in the day to help him on investigations and stuff like that. Equally, he's got a friend, Anna, who works for him. She checks his messages and she basically helps him find jobs and helps him on jobs as well. So assists him on, you know, doing stakeouts and keeping an eye on people. But in general, Anna is that really kind of anchor point for Ethan's life. She's a very close friend, and that relationship gets fleshed out going forward in the series. But she really kind of forms that concrete part of his life that's always there, that's always stable, and he always can rely on it. So when that's removed in certain parts of later stories, it really plays havoc with Ethan. For however intelligent and hard and tough Ethan is, there's always shocks to be had, and there's always twists and turns for this surfer investigator guy that is just brilliant. The first book takes place in 1981, and then we kind of revisit him going forward. There are flashbacks and even flash forwards in this story, but it all flows so well that it doesn't confuse you really. And I say this story, I mean the series overall, as that. Book 2 is Friend of the Devil. This focuses on a missing B-movie actress. Ethan forms a relationship with a girl, a Vietnamese girl, who he meets in the library while investigating. I think, not even a missing persons case. It was actually a man who had faked his own death, and he was trying to track him down where he lived, and so he was using the library, and she worked there. They started having a relationship. They got into a physical romantic relationship, and then one day viewing films within the old theatre that Ethan Reckless works, because he loves watching these old movies on film in his theatre on his own, not opening it to the public. And she notices her stepsister, who had been missing several years before, and so Ethan, because he loves her and because he wants to help her, takes on the job of trying to track down her stepsister. And that takes him into this very mysterious, sexual, violent, drug-induced world of Hollywood, of, you know, B-movie actors being dragged into satanic rituals, and cults being formed. It's an amazing story, this one, and it really does kind of go to places that the first one never even touches upon. It's very thematically different. I mean, he is going after a missing person, whereas the first one he's trying to track down money. But this one, the places it goes and the things that Ethan Reckless does are really good. I like this one a lot. Destroy All Monsters is one of the ones that brings Ethan's partner, Anna, into the forefront of it all. It really features her heavily. She becomes part of the cast of characters, really. And I love Destroy All Monsters purely because, again, it riffed on the theme. Ethan gets employed to find out dirt on this land developer to try and put him out of business for a politician, because the politician's father had land stolen from him that's now being exploited by this guy. And so he has hired Ethan to try and find everything he can and trying to find some dirt on this guy to put him out of business, to really kind of create a smear campaign essentially. But it does not go to plan at all. Ethan makes a lot of bad mistakes and a lot of enemies come out of it, and equally his trusting of his client kind of backfires on him to a certain degree as well. And it ends with Anna making some really life-changing decisions and a big kind of climactic end. That's another thing that I love, is there's always big climactic ends. Ghosting You is the fourth book, and this features Anna as the main protagonist. It literally leaves Ethan to one side totally. Ethan is off trying to track a girl down for a friend in the aftermath of the 1989 San Francisco earthquake in the story. So he's gone, and Anna gets given a case by this old B-movie actress who comes in and she remembers from her youth. And her story is that her dog's gone missing. But she's living in this haunted house that she's inherited, that all these murders apparently happened, and was an old Catholic school and things like that. And that's the other thing that I missed, actually, is the stories always start out midway or late on in the actual story. It's kind of like, this is where our character is, but how did they get there? So it opens up with Anna being stabbed and struggling to breathe and live. And so then it jumps back to her being given the job of finding this dog. Alongside that, you get Anna's personal life with her mother and her mother's boyfriends and stuff fleshed out. And so the character development on Anna and you is phenomenal. And she really is as interesting and as engaging as Ethan, because she's been a fundamental part of 3 books previous, and you didn't really know that much about her. So by the time book 4 comes around, you're kind of fine with her being that main character, because you were interested to find out, okay, what is she about? Who is she? And she does enough things in the other 3 to be funny and endearing that, again, she makes a good main protagonist. Strangely, this is probably my favourite out of all of them, for 2 reasons. One, the story is great and the mystery is great, and it never really pans out exactly as you think. And even when it's over, Anna kind of feels that something's up, and so she keeps pushing because it's still not fully finished. And her tenacity and the whole mystery of this missing dog and the haunted house is fascinating. But Ethan in this story, because he's not there, and then at some point he kind of makes an impact on the story, which is amazingly cool, and I loved. And when it happened in here, I'm like, oh, that's super cool, I love that. And so yeah, I really liked this story a lot, and this was one of the ones that I was shocked by how good the story was, because the premise started off and you wasn't sure where the story would go with the premise, but as it goes forward, the more you find out about this haunted mansion, the more you find out about what happened to the missing dog and what's going on. And then the simplicity of the mystery is what really captured my attention with this, and I quite like that. I really don't like crime books that have got really convoluted ideas and concepts behind them, and you can't say that about any of these, I don't think, to be honest, in my opinion anyway. Follow Me Down is the last, and again, like I said for the last one, features 1989 as the pivotal year, and this is Ethan's story when he travelled away. So here you get Anna's story, but then in the same time frame you get what's happening to Ethan when he's left Anna behind in LA and gone to San Francisco, I think it was, yeah. And he is being given the job of tracking down a girlfriend, or wife rather, his apartment. He is living in an apartment because something happens to the cinema that he was living as the story goes forward, and he's living in an apartment, and in a neighbouring apartment are 2 guys, one of which has a son in San Francisco, and he's never done anything for him, and his wife goes missing and he feels really guilty, and he knows that Ethan is one of these people that can find people and that can do stuff, and so he asks him, can he go up to San Francisco and find his wife for him? And so he goes, but what he comes across is nothing what he kind of would have expected. He finds that this woman's upbringing has put her on a path of revenge, and ultimately he's trailing her on this carnage full revenge story, really, that she's leaving in her wake, and he's trying to catch up with her and not necessarily stop her, but find her and make sure that she knows that her husband is there and he wants her back, and that she's left this life behind. But again, this story, for Ethan's character, for the places it goes, for the themes it explores, is the most brutal out of all of them, because it explores some very deep, very dark themes, and is a revenge tale, essentially. The one thing that you will notice early on with Reckless is it's being narrated by Ethan, and so Ethan is narrating from at some point in the future, and you get inklings and full pages of where Ethan is writing up his story in the future, and it introduces that slowly. But that doesn't reduce the stakes, because sometimes when you know a character is safe and living 20 or 30 years after the story you're reading, sometimes the stakes of the story are not that large and not that important. But for this, it doesn't really affect, because the mysteries and the cases that he goes on are so interesting in so many ways, and they keep you engaged. And again, just because Ethan is protected doesn't mean that all the other characters that you grow to like and engage with are protected as well, because you only know that Ethan survives, not the rest of them. This is the end of the 1980s for Ethan Reckless. When Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips come back, they will be revisiting the character in the 1990s. All of these are standard size hardbacks. They all come with great paper, nice thick quality paper, full colour glossy paper, sewn binding, really well made books, and for the size of them, they didn't necessarily need to go to town with very high quality binding, but they did. All the end pages in each book are unique to the storyline going on inside. And yeah, they are great, well-made books, and I love these. And I'll be keeping these forever, because number 3 has got a signed sketch of Ethan by Sean Phillips, which I love, so I'm never upgrading these. These are mine forever. Even though the others are not signed and sketched, I'm not having just one random one. They're all staying, and even if they bring out this distracting, oversized hardcover of the series, I won't be jumping on. These are mine, and I can't wait for more Reckless, because they're great crime, noir, detective, mystery stories that always shock, and they always do something that you were never quite expecting. And that's the same for any Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips work. They always do something that you never expect, which I love about them. I really love that. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.